And it was interesting because while at DI school, so my class was the first class where females were given the campaign covers. So I had mentioned the cord. We were the first class that got the campaign covers. And I'm telling you, that was like controversy, And again, you're talking 1996. So it's not like it was a million years ago. I look at these young ladies today and it's like ancient history when you think about it, but it was a big deal, back then. I mean, all the way from looking manly to they don't deserve it, and just interesting in the way that people, accepted it. I mean, I never wore the cord, so I don't know. But man, that campaign cover, it was one more step toward equality. I know that sounds, a little crazy, but one step more toward equality. And I'm telling you, man, female drill instructors rocked those campaign covers.
This episode is brought to you by Triton Coffee, a veteran-owned brand and lifestyle. And while they're masters of cold brew, Triton's beans are roasted to create a flavor that shines whether you drink it hot or cold. There's no bitterness, there's no burnt taste, it's just good tasting coffee. Their coffees taste amazing hot, which is how I prefer it, while still designed to excel as a cold brew. But Triton Coffee is more than just great taste. Triton supports your wellness journey, featuring ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics. It's made for those who enjoy good coffee and value quality and health. So if you're looking for a coffee that meets you wherever your day takes you, hot or cold, you need to check out Trident Coffee. I know I said I prefer hot coffee, but here's a tip from me. Mix their instant cold brew with your favorite protein for a protein coffee drink that's great cold. You can thank me later. I know there's a lot of coffee options out there, but give Trident a try. I know you'll enjoy it as much as I do. Head over to tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. I'm joined this time by a retired Marine Corps warrant officer. She spent 26 years in the Marine Corps and retired in 2014. Her story isn't the most common, but I'm going to let her tell that story. During her time in the Marine Corps, she was a drill instructor, deployed to Iraq, had quite an eventful career. Originally intimidated by college, which was one of the reasons why she went into the Marine Corps out of high school as opposed to going to college. She didn't start her college career until very late in her time in the Marine Corps. Today, she's got her MBA. So combined with the experiences and what she learned in the Marine Corps and her education, since retirement, she's propelled herself quite successfully through the corporate world. Always looking to help others, she's also committed to helping veterans and their transitions. She's got a lot of good information, so let's get into it. Here's episode 174 with Kathryn Warren.
You had Brian on, you've had Phil on, you've had Isaac.
Lee?
On. So, I mean, it's kind of funny. We're all, in the same stomping grounds.
Well, and
as far as connections and, we all come from the same place, but yet the stories are so vastly different.
I think that's the most important thing for me is, and obviously here in the I'll call us the San Diego area, there is a high population of Navy and Marine. I don't get many Air Force, many Army. There's just not that many of them here. More than likely, if they're here, they got out and then moved here.
Gotcha.
Whereas, especially with a lot of the Marines, they EAS'd out of Pendleton and they just, hey, this is a really nice place to live. I'm just going to stay.
Exactly.
Or they've already established their family and their kids are already in school in the areas. But that's one of the things that I rely on for this podcast is that circle of things of who can you recommend? Who do you think, and inevitably there's always, what's that joke? The 6 degrees of
Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. That somebody somehow knows someone. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've tried to connect with a guest for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. And then I'll interview somebody that I don't even realize that they know that other person. And yeah, I'll put you guys together kind of deal. So it's definitely something I rely on all the time.
Good. I like that. Yeah, it's a good little circle to run in. And it's funny because we're like a Marine Corps family. I mean, take my brother and I, my ex-husband, my husband, my son-in-law, and then we got the next generation. I always call it like growing the family business. So my stepson's in the Navy and he's stationed down here in San Diego, but my daughter's in the Air Force.
Uh-oh.
So it's interesting, how now she understands, because she's like one of those, I call them like true military kids, where from the time she was born, literally until she had to give up her ID card, at 26, for, healthcare stuff.
Right.
She was like that true military kid. And I can't believe she like joined the service, which is funny in its own. And her story is way different, than mine was. But even she'll start cracking. I'll say something and she's like, well, Mom, they make it simple for Marines for a reason. And I'm just like, but I mean, that's been a fun, I always say my military mom, status that comes along with it, but it's a really cool little circle. And it's so funny because that same group, like when she decided, hey, I'm raising my hand and I'm doing this, that same group welcomed her. And when she was at OTS, we're at a beer club, function. And I'm like, hey, if you guys wouldn't mind, because like I'm texting her because I can, and we all did like a video, hang in there, Sam, you're almost done, and I'm like, what other person, is going to get that from a community that they don't even know they're part of yet.
Right.
So like I said, just cool stuff.
She had never before going in, never even expressed an interest or an overt interest.
Mm-mm. If I like out of my two biological kids, if I would have picked the other daughter, she's my ICU nurse, so she has that where, Samantha's my occupational therapist, but it was so funny, because, just made that decision. And we always knew my stepson, was kind of leaning in high school, toward going, and we were trying to get him to like look at other branches, but he was like dead set on the Navy, which is fine. But it's funny how this is just really like evolved.
Well, at the end of the day, though, your daughter was immersed in it, like you said, from birth. And good, bad, or indifferent, we are products of our parents and how we were raised. And even if you didn't think you were pushing her towards it, or if you consciously thought, I'm not going to push her towards it, I want her to make her own decisions, there's something that just comes from osmosis and being around it all the time, that probably just feels what's her normal.
Yeah. And I mean, it was so, like I said, odd. And then when I was working for Syracuse, doing the program manager stuff for the certification program I ran, we're sitting outside during COVID because that's what everybody did. And she's like, oh, I think I'm going to join the Navy. And I was like, okay. And it was just so interesting because I had a guy who was going through the program at the time. He was the former director of OTPT at the Naval Hospital. And organically, it like really came up. And he said, have her give me a call. And that's how her thing, like totally started. And so, I mean, it was just such a weird, eerie, fun, like when, we let her go, and she's going to check in, and I'm telling her, this is what you got to wear. We did a little bun ceremony and I gave her my little sock bun. And I'm like, it's all yours now. And then my female Marine friends, are like, if you wear your hair in a ponytail, I'm disowning you, kind of deal and everything. But I can picture her showing up with her Travis Manion polo shirt on, her khakis, her belt, her little Go Fasters, her hair in a bun. And I could just picture that Air Force drill instructor, like smelling her, like that's the one. And sure enough, like right out the gate, she was like the little flight commander, and everything. And it was priceless. Totally different, experience that like I had and everybody else, Marine Corps wise and the family had. But it's been fun living like vicariously through all of them.
She go to the academy?
No, she went to, so she did a direct commission. And so Maxwell Air Force Base. And then for your like healthcare professionals, your like chaplains, lawyers, it's supposed to be 5 weeks, kind of like the fast track. She got the 8-week deal, which really in the long run was good for her because she got to learn, something else while she was there. And then because she was a direct commission, she had orders to JBEAR, the Joint Base up in Anchorage. And so we literally chilled out over Labor Day on the Gulf Coast. Literally. And then it was so great. I flew with her to Anchorage, and her dad and I were like, listen, we know you're grown. But at the same time, if you want us, you don't have to do this by yourself. And so we each had our like piece, in helping her move. But again, those military connections, I'm making phone calls to folks that I knew did something to like point us. She was the only one who got her TMO shipment, on time. She didn't have to wait, forever to do it. But we literally over Labor Day chilled out and then flew up to Anchorage. And then she just recently moved to Philadelphia. She's going through a hand therapy fellowship.
Very cool.
But yeah, like I said, it's just such a cool, and then I've got to experience Alaska, because I'm mom. So and I'm just happy that she like lets me, and she's not embarrassed. And so like I walk into the clinic and her boss is like, okay, she's mine now, and then I'm listening to her boss and listening to her. And I'm just like, doing one of those. But I've made some really great like friends just through her. I have my relationship with them and she has.
Well, and there's something to a degree, you having that military knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it sounds like you're not trying to overstep, but at the same token, let me just knock down a couple of the little hurdles
mm-hmm.
that maybe somebody who doesn't have me in their family or military in their family, just to kind of help them along.
Mm-hmm.
Not trying to make it easier for them, but just trying to remove some of the barriers and the hurdles that everybody inevitably deals with.
When she first got there, so she gets all her mop gear and she's going to do like her her mop exercises, or CBurn stuff now is what they call it. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her field protective mask and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm like helping you with this. And I'm thinking, should I like flip the, And so she comes back and we're at the little temporary lodge. And I told her, hey, nobody's here. Just strip right now and I'll go take your stuff and throw it over there. And she's like, oh, there was no gas. I'm like, what do you mean there was no gas? You did this whole mop training, thing today. But I mean, just funny how the difference is where, I would be choking.
Yeah.
What I mean?
No yanking your mask off, yelling out your name.
So fun stuff like that. But she's learned. And I've also, I've had to let her go, and kind of make all those, mistakes she's going to make, and warning her about like the traps not to fall into, as far as making sure you still have your life, you still keep your identity, because that's a lot of, what I still, and I hate to admit it, but there's still certain things that, okay, I got to stop, with that mindset. I really have to change, some of the way I do things and some of the things that I, think are the best way to do things, which really
Your daughter's story is very interesting, but I want to take the listeners through more of your story, because you've already alluded to this being in military and the Marine Corps. Let's go way, way back. So where is hometown? Where'd you grow up?
So growing up outside of Cleveland, Ohio, the majority of it, Bedford, which is southeast. And then I finished up my high school in Parma, which is southwest.
Did you come from a big family?
Nope, very small. Very small. My mom, my brother, and myself.
And what'd your mom do for work?
My mom was a nurse. So she did a really great job raising the both of us. Super proud of her. Whether she believes it or not, a lot of who I am and who my brother is solely because of the example that she showed us. She might not think so, but it really is, because she really taught us what hard work is. And if you want to get from A to B, you have to be willing to put in the grit, and do the work. So she was a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic. I want to say just a little bit over 25 years.
One of the things, and this is my own unofficial psychology study in talking to many of the guests who've been on the podcast, those who come from what I say being raised by primarily a single mother,
mm-hmm.
there is just a different work ethic, a different mentality. Because I think women who raise children by themselves don't get enough credit for how strong they actually need to be. And like I said, I'm just doing my own unofficial psychology study here. Again, I use the word osmosis, but just by being around that type of person makes those children just naturally a little bit more determined, a little bit more strong, a little bit more. If I've got a goal and a challenge, I'm going to figure a way around it.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because our father was not part of our lives. And so again, you could use genetics to a certain degree, but I don't know who the guy is. My brother doesn't know who the guy is. We know he was there, and there was this whole thing, that happened way before, we were old enough to understand and realize, but it was because of her. And again, we have our own personality. We joke and say, you know, I'm his closest genetic match. So as different as we can be, you know, we think about it that way. We're literally genetically, you know, the closest thing that we could get to being one another. And I often joke and I say, I'm the female version of you, you know, when it comes down there, because we are so very, very similar in the way we do things. But my mom, I wish, you know, and again, she's heard it before. I want her to just really accept it, that, you know, because of you, you know, we are who we are. I mean, yeah, we had to forge our own paths, but she set the example for us.
I would imagine to a degree, it's probably hard for her to take credit for it, because she's probably just thinking about all the things that I wish I could have done more for my kids in a weird way. And as you as a parent, same way. We all look at the things that we've done for our children and say, boy, if I'd have done that differently, or if I'd have not done that. Mm-hmm. I think that's where we spend most of our time, not thinking of, man, I raised some pretty good kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she has. I mean, I, of course, say that, but she really did. We were good kids growing up. We had our moments, but never got caught up in any of the hubbub, you know, that was going on. We didn't, you know, have to do things to be part of the popular crowd. We both just kind of did our own thing. We both were kind of band geeks, me more so than my brother. But, you know, band kids, you know, are generally good kids, you know, and we, you know, grew up, stayed out of trouble, you know, got good grades, all the good stuff.
Did you play music pretty much your whole life?
Up until, so that's a fun story. Up until I graduated from high school, I actually joined the Marine Corps to do that. Which clearly that did not work out the way it was supposed to work, but loved it. So loved marching band, concert band, you know, anything orchestral. Drum and bugle corps, though, was my thing. And when I discovered that, I think it was in 8th grade when I discovered that, that was just like the coup de grace, you know, for me. And, you know, how do I take a show, you know, and a piece of music and just master it? And so I marched up until my senior year, primarily in the Cleveland area. I did a year with a drum corps. It was an all-female drum and bugle corps up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And then my last year finished out with the Crossmen. And at the time, Crossmen were out of Westchester, Pennsylvania, and now they're in San Antonio, Texas.
So these are private groups, not through your high school or anything like that?
No, youth nonprofit. They're all 501c3s. It's still a thing today. That's how my older daughter and my son-in-law met. My younger, my granddaughter is into drum corps, but just a really good way for kids to kind of have that independence. But at the same time, your sole focus is that show, the music, you know, and doing the best you can. They have a big competition in early August. The contract has been with Lucas Oil Stadium. So again, there's
Indianapolis.
So you'll get all the drum corps from the West Coast that make their way, you know, east, and then all the ones from the East Coast that kind of end up in the Midwest. And then they all have, you know, their competition there, you know, over the course of that week. So it's a big deal. The Marine Corps Drum and Bugle Corps opens up from them because they honor their military roots. And so even though the Marine Corps Drum and Bugle Corps doesn't have all the flair, you know, that goes along with it, it definitely set the stage for these organizations that are still alive and well, you know, today.
Weird question, because you said your goal going into the Marine Corps was the Drum and Bugle Corps, mm-hmm. or the Marine Corps Band. Do they not, quote unquote, recruit from these competitions?
When I was
actively recruit?
When I was growing up, no. Nowadays, so if you go to DCI finals or you go to one of the bigger shows that are there, you're going to find recruiters there. And it's interesting with military music. The Armed Forces has the Armed Forces School of Music, but it's Army, Navy, Marine Corps. So the Air Force, you're professional musicians, you go do your own thing. The Coast Guard, not quite sure about that. But it's interesting just the levels of musicianship that come through each branch of service. So the Marines do their thing there, the Army does their thing there, the Navy does their thing there. But yet you'll find yourself in classes, you know, with the different branches of service itself. So.
Because they really, the little bit that I know about it, they really take their performance, their musicians and singers very seriously. Mm-hmm. So even while you're, quote unquote, in that branch, you're pretty much a professional musician. Mm-hmm. Is that Am I understanding it correctly?
It is. And, depending on where you're stationed, just specifically for the Marine Corps, because that's the one I'm most familiar with, but where you're stationed, at each time, there's a responsibility that each band has, that each band supports, whether it's here locally in San Diego, across the country, different recruiting, stations that are out there. Using the one at the depot, for example, obviously graduations, are a big thing there. But yeah, you're that professional musician. And it's interesting. And again, these are one of the things that I got to live vicariously through. My son-in-law was watching him kind of grow and get to experience, all the things musician-wise, that I never really got to. So vicarious living.
Other than music, were you a good student academically?
I was that student who did enough, but never really had anybody to say you could do it or push harder or have the drive. I got accepted to the colleges that I wanted to go to, never even thought about how the heck am I going to pay for this, type of deal. And again, we're talking quite a long time ago at this point.
The 2000s, right?
Yeah. Let's just keep it there. But never really thought about, doing it. I thought at that time, I'm going to go and I'm going to be a music major. I'm going to be a music teacher. That was kind of like the goal, in applying to the schools. And I didn't apply to anything outside of Ohio. I don't even think I applied to Ohio State. It was more just like local.
You're going to get kicked out of the club.
I know. The Ohio State.
There's a little part of me that loves whenever you see the players on TV and they're, defensive line, the Ohio
State.
There's just something to it.
But, it's just funny how things happen, and one just little click sets your trajectory, going in a different direction. And during concert band season, you have folders that you keep all your music in, and ours happened to say Army music. And I was like, wow, could you do this as a job? And so I started with the Army. And even as a young girl, I was just kind of like, I think it's all the recruiters sometimes. And, the pitch that the recruiter gives you. And so I brought the guy to the house, and my mom was just like, what the heck is she doing? Kind of thing. Cause I'm thinking, wow, I could do this and get paid for it. That's where my young brain was. But really just didn't feel it, from the Army. So I kind of let it go. And I don't even remember them pursuing, at the time.
This during your junior or senior high school?
My junior year. And so, kind of let it rest, marched another summer of drum corps, that year, come back into my senior year. So you're applying, for schools and everything like that. And we're walking down the hall, and there's that, the big nip lock, I know they actually have a name, we're looking for a few good men. And so even at that time, I was like, what do you mean by that? So then kind of going up, and that's how it all started. But I was amazed that they had a drum and bugle corps in the Marine Corps. The other branches of service didn't have that. So I'm like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps, and I'm going to get to march drum corps, the whole time. So that was my premise. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get paid for it, because how bad could it be?
Did you have anybody in your life as far as any advice or anything towards the military, or were you all just doing your own research, finding your way on your own path?
Finding my way. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. I recently gave a Veterans Day speech at the Ocean Hills Country Club, and our theme was D-Day. And so we don't know a lot about my grandfather's actual history, just because his records were the records that were lost in the fire. But I know he landed there on one of those beaches there. And so he had already passed away by the time I started thinking about all of this, but I never really had any family members that were like, hey, you need to do this, or you need to talk about this. So it was all the self-education on my part.
So by the time you graduated, were you already enlisted with the Marine Corps on the delayed enlistment?
I sure did. I raised my hand. I think it was October 24th, raised my hand. And then the following June is when I ended up shipping out.
And Parris Island?
Parris Island.
How was that experience for you?
I'll say one thing. My recruiting station did a really good job preparing us for that. So again, there's a little bit of shock and awe, that goes along with it. Things are really different nowadays because, again, we're talking a little while ago. In fact, my battalion that I was part of was decommissioned. I believe it was either in 22 or 23. I think it was 2023 they decommissioned it just because they've integrated training now. So back in those days,
let's just go ahead and rip the Band-Aid off. And I'll lay it on the table. I graduated high school in 1987.
Oh, so did I.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we're the same. So back in those days, all the yellow footprints were there. But then we had to get back on the bus and they drove us to 4th Battalion. And at that point in time, I don't know what was worse, getting yelled at on the yellow footprints or having to get back on that bus. And it went around the horseshoe and there was like 2 female drill instructors just waiting. And it was me and this other girl. So there's only like 2 of us, on the bus. And I think that piece was almost scarier than the whole yellow footprint.
I can't disappear.
the whole yellow footprint thing. And of course, things are way different now. But I did well. I missed my family. I would think about my recruiters as I was running because they would always push us, to run faster. I never was an athlete or anything. It was all marching band. I was a band geek. So all of that, but I really got into running. I remember my first time like running 3 miles, like how proud I was, of myself. So I went down there like knowing and understanding. I wasn't the fastest person there, but I definitely wasn't at the back of the pack. But yeah, it was an experience.
How much of the time in boot camp is, I'll call it segregated male, female for you at that time?
So at that time, and again, going back years, we were at 4th Battalion. I don't remember exactly like how similar our training schedules were. I will admit that, we had a makeup class and I didn't understand that even back then, like, why are we doing that? But now as I go back and I look at history, I understand, why we did the things that we did. But it wasn't until General Gray came in, I want to say 88 maybe, that things really started shifting as far as what we did and what the males did. Of course, we saw them when we were there, but I don't remember, like, did we, like, was I on the left-hand side of the rifle range and they were on the right-hand side? Or am I getting that confused with when I did the drill instructor thing? So, yeah, it was definitely, the women were still wearing the red cords. That's what distinguished you as far as being, a female drill instructor. Even back then, I remember the males just kind of like getting out of the way because there was nothing worse, than encountering a female drill instructor, on top of everything else. But it was an experience.
Going back to talking to the recruiter, when you walked in and said, I want to do drum and bugle corps,
Mm-hmm.
you said that they kind of opened your eyes to it. So going in, did you already know that wasn't your path, or it was something to the effect of, yeah, you can do that, but you got to do this first?
No, it was one of those where I did what I had to do to get into the music program. And then, of course, you have to do all the other stuff, to get there. There's very few people, and I know the Marine Corps does it. Don't quote me on any of it because I'm not the expert. But if you're at a certain proficiency level, you're still going to go to boot camp, but you might not have to go to the School of Music just based on your proficiency level. But everybody has to go through boot camp, at least in the Marine Corps. I don't know about the other branches. And
is your MOS contract actually banned?
It sure is. I was a 5593, if I remember right, back then, which was drum and bugle corps percussionist. So.
But you still have to go to the School of Infantry. School
of Music.
So is it?
So when I went through, they didn't have what they refer to as MCT, the Marine Combat Training that comes right after boot camp. So you went from boot camp, you went to your service school, whatever school that was, and it was right after, I want to say, that next fiscal year that they started MCT, and so I missed out on that piece.
So, and did you have the music proficiency where you didn't have to go to a basic music school?
Oh no, I had to go to I had to go to school. And that's in Norfolk, Little Creek.
How long is that school? Or was that school?
It's 6 months. So it's a long school. Proficiency wise, I wasn't where I needed to be. So auxiliary percussion, so all your mallet instruments, xylophone, marimba, that's kind of where my forte was. But in order to get there, you had to be a D&B percussionist. So then it's going back to all the like rudimentary, type of drumming that's there, which I actually enjoyed. It was just a little bit too late, if that makes any sense. And so I ended up getting dropped from the School of Music, which was my first crushing blow ever in my life. I thought my life was like over. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then you were watching other people, who were getting orders and they were becoming a cook, and the guys were going to the infantry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me? And I ended up getting orders. It said travel clerk. And so again, you're young, naive, you don't really know. There's no computers to go research this stuff. I'm like, am I going to be handing like plane tickets out, to people?
I'm going to be a stewardess on a C-17 transport.
I didn't understand, what all of that was. So when that did happen, I did realize somewhere along the way that even though I couldn't do the music piece, I really did like the Marine Corps and that there was a lot of value. That I was still going to be able to get out of the Marine Corps. And it was, even at that young age, it was going to help me grow, in ways that I would not have grown, back in Ohio.
Silly question, looking back on it, when you were dropped, you'd been performing, doing music. What was it that just you couldn't grasp?
My chops, like, just the rudimentary, drumming. There were some things that I did really well. It's one of those things where maybe if I had like another year, one-on-one instruction, that I had, things would have been different. But it was like I was playing catch up the whole time. And, I wasn't the only one, so it was one of those things where, I wasn't like this sore thumb there. There were other people in other branches of service also that kind of ended up, with the same fate. I look back on it. And again, it was like the first time somebody told me no. And it's really how you deal with it, afterwards. And for years, I kind of moped, especially when I would see my friends. And again, I was literally friends with some of these people my entire time on active duty when I was there. But at the end of the day, I got to do things and achieve things I probably never would have been able to had I been in that field and in that realm. And it gave me more opportunities. Again, at that time, you don't know what they are. I'm looking at my orders. I'm going to be a clerk. And I didn't realize that I was getting into like the finance and accounting, piece of the Marine Corps, which again, at that very young age, who knows what that is. But I was really happy to know once I talked to people more about it, went to the school, that there was math involved. There was regulation, involved. There was payment accuracy, involved. And so even though math, I'd always joke about math in school, it wasn't like I was doing, algebraic, equations or anything, but it was a big deal to make sure your pay or your travel pay was correct for a variety of different reasons. And the military's really changed, at least in my time, from those moments when I would have to by hand deduct, your subsistence allowance, things have obviously changed since then.
Can you check my numbers? I hope I did this right.
And making sure. And I mean, everything was done manually. We were just at the cusp of like using computers to make all of this happen. I mean, processing checks, just having a slew, you know what I mean? And then hoping that you don't have to void, 130 checks because you put it in, I don't even remember. It was like an old dot matrix, type of machine that we would put it in. So fun times.
The commanding officer still hand signing every single one of those?
No. So every dispersing office that you're at, you have the dispersing officer, you have like a stamp. But then you're also going to have a bunch of people there that have bidirection. So my dispersing officer would never sign checks. I was always the one, signing the bidirection and then, my name. So.
You're like, your signature looks really different. So taking it back to when you first went in, your plan was Marine Corps musician.
Mm-hmm.
Were you thinking a career at that point? And then when you got dropped, did that change your career trajectory? It
changed my career trajectory. I had still thought about, like, am I going to stay in? Am I going to get out? We didn't have post 9/11 at that time. We had the Montgomery GI Bill. Would I still go back to school and be like a military, so I mean, I was thinking, would I still want to do that? I never really did it again. I mean, I played a little bit here and there, but it was like that part of my life just kind of came to an end. And I got involved, with what I was doing, on the finance side.
Where was your first duty station?
El Toro, California.
How was that for you coming out to California?
It was really different. My mom and I drove cross country, so that was always fun. I do remember getting on the 91 after the 15, and even all those years later, earlier, it was still a mess. No GPSs, and so I remember the map, being out in those Thomas guides that you had. And I'm thinking, oh, there has to be signs. There has to be signs. But it was like rush hour, and I just couldn't believe the traffic. But I got there, again, I'm from Ohio, don't even really understand what traffic is at this point. I remember driving my mom to LA to fly her home and totally misjudging like all of that, like literally throwing her at the curb. She like goes running in to catch her flight. And I didn't even know if she caught it until the next day when I called her at home and she answered the phone. I mean, just,
the good old days.
Oh, I know. I know.
That was, so you got to California 88?
88, yeah.
And basically kind of walk me through, how do you go from going in as band, getting dropped, going basically clerical, and then ending up as a drill instructor?
I really like the Marine Corps. I really got into the structure. I really got into the regulations. I also made the decision, and again, you go back to how you thought back then, and it's very different. But I made the decision that I was going to be the best that I could possibly be at all of that. And it wasn't just all about me. How could I be the best Marine? How could I be the best mother? How could I be the best coworker? And helping my fellow coworkers out. And so I definitely got noticed, why I was there as a young person, just doing the things, that you need to do. I wasn't married initially. And so kind of juggling the single parent thing. And I did have, support, from my daughter's dad at the time. But we didn't get married until 1992. So you still had that like single parent thing that was going on, but the both of us were able to do all the things, and make it happen. But as a young parent, I found out, you don't only have plan A and plan B, you have plans A through Z. And so it was always constantly, and I learned at a young age that even if I don't agree with somebody else's perspective on what I am and what I'm not doing, that I needed to be 10 steps ahead. Even if I didn't have the answer, I had to at least appear that I had the answer. So I could still do all the Marine things, but I could still be a parent, to my daughter and my daughters, eventually at the time. But we left El Toro. We went to Japan for 3 years. So my young daughters got to experience, growing up on Okinawa for 3 years. The older one remembers bits and pieces. The younger one was still too young to really remember. But that's what I wanted to do, was I wanted to do this tour, and then I wanted to come back, and I wanted to go to the drill field. And I don't know if it was just timing. I would joke and say, I'm not trying to go to the Bahamas or anything. I want to go to the drill field. So it was one of those things where I worked really well with my staff in COIC, who saw potential. And I really looked up to him. And I think about that guy all the time. And even in today's day and age, it's like, whatever happened, you know what I mean, to these people who were so impactful, in your life. He ended up being friends with the special assignments monitor. And I think in the long run, that's actually what happened, where, nope, she's going to go and she's going to do this. So I did leave Japan, and I came back and went to drill instructor school.
Are you still in your first enlistment, or is this second enlistment?
This is going on my third enlistment now. So
was that part of the requirement of getting drill field, is to also extend your enlistment?
No.
Okay.
It was something that I wanted to do, and I don't remember the percentages, but let's just say like 90-10. So 90% of the people wanted to be there, 10% were chosen, to be there. And I don't know if the numbers are similar now or not, but it was definitely, you wanted to do that. Where recruiting, it was kind of like rock, paper, scissors, please don't pick me. And I know as the years went by, they got a lot more tailored on who did and who didn't. But that was just something I really wanted to do.
Other than just finding that you loved being in the Marine Corps and being a Marine, was there a single event or anything that really kind of opened your eyes to, maybe I could be a drill instructor?
I mean, having my daughter, and then having my other daughter, it's like, your Marine Corps mom, like, how am I going to do this? How are we going to do this as a family? And it kind of goes back to wanting to be like the best I could be. There wasn't like an event or anything. It was just one of those things where, I really want to do that. I want to be part of shaping like what the Marine Corps is going to be in the future. So again, even at that age, you're thinking about it and, what do I want to do? So it wasn't like for the glory. I knew well, in advance exactly what I was going to be, walking into. I knew it was going to be hard on the family, but it was one of those things that for my future, because by this time I decided I was going to make it a career. This was going to set me up whatever direction, I wanted to go in the military. It was going to set me up that I did something outside, of my normal job, and I did well.
Where's drill instructor school at?
So at that time, women were still at Parris Island, and then you also have a DI school down here at San Diego. So all the women at that time went to DI school at Parris Island with our male counterparts as well.
How was that experience for you, especially comparing it to your boot camp?
Humbling. So humbling. You go in there, and again, 90% want to be there, okay? And you're coming from your duty station where, like, I was the fastest runner, I was the most squared away. And I remember running, like, our first PFT, and I'm, like, looking around, and there's all these women around me, and I'm like, how did this happen? And I'm, like, trying to catch up, with everybody else because the competition, was just so, like, fierce in doing it. But it was a humbling experience, especially they had just started the Crucible. So like my DI school class was the one that tested it, out. And so now, you're doing what the recruits are going to be doing. And it's just always interesting when you take a group of seasoned professionals and you put them back in that space. How many really just adapt with it and go with it? How many complain about it? Yeah. And everything else. But it was a humbling experience. A lot of good life lessons, a lot of good friend lessons, along the way. And also having to like figure out how can I do my job, advance and do the best that I can do, but how do I still be a team player? How do I still tell people, like, you want to take care of each other, so how do you take care of each other without coming off, as sounding like, we would always say Nick, the new guy, where, oh, Nick has all the answers, to this, so how do you do that? And, like anything else, you get somewhere new and you realize, okay, well, my communication was like the best, it was intended in the best ways, but, maybe it's not coming out a certain way. So it's really having to learn the environment, learning the tempo of the environment, operationally, and then learning the people, because everybody there is on that same mission, that you're on.
Was there any, I'm assuming your daughter's father, your soon-to-be husband, was also in the Marine Corps.
He was.
Was you going to the drill field going to potentially impact your guys' overall relationship? Because I'm assuming you've only got then two options, either San Diego or Parris Island, right?
Just Parris Island.
Once you graduate from that and you are actually a drill instructor, it's just Parris Island?
Just Parris Island. No, and we had gotten married by that point, and so he had gotten out of the military. Oh, okay. So then I'm already a little bit different now because I'm not married to an active duty spouse. So he was doing his own thing and growing his career, at the time. So when I went, when I got there, he was really the stable piece of our household because I was so crazy, with doing everything that I needed to do down at Parris Island.
Silly but personal question: do you think you would have taken on that challenge if he was still active?
I don't know. I think it would have. He had zero desire to do anything like that.
I only ask because there aren't many people who balance not only a marriage while still being active in the military, but both being active in the military. And I've heard a couple stories where trying to get similar or general close duty stations, all of a sudden now it's not just me. I've got to worry about my husband or my spouse.
He didn't stay in. He didn't want to stay in after his 4. He had no desire to do anything like that. But if he was active duty, I could see him trying to just get orders, to either Parris Island or Beaufort, because Beaufort was right around the corner there. It would have complicated things, just because he would have had the active duty piece, to deal with as well. But that's the one thing I'm eternally grateful for, is I never had to worry about some semi-stranger having to go pick my kids up from daycare, because he was always able to do it or figure out a way. And then you start growing, your network, your family, where, now you meet other people. One of the guys I went to DI school with literally lived like right around the corner. So then we have this friendship, and, they had kids. So now it's, you have the connection where now there's one more person, if you need for somebody to take care of the kids or pick up the kids. But he was going to school. No, he had graduated. So I want to say looking for work, but it was the back half of my time there, when he finally went out and got a job and everything like that. So there was some stay-at-home dad time as well, which again, I'm like super grateful for, because I never had to worry.
Well, one of the things you already mentioned when it goes to the bigger picture of the transition piece, or just navigating through life, is the network and the people that you come in contact with.
Mm-hmm.
While you were at El Toro, you made not just friends, but had a good working relationship with the NCOIC.
Mm-hmm.
And it was his relationship with the detailer that got you to DI school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things I always try to stress when you're thinking about navigating your career, not just your transition. It's working on and building that network of people that may not be somebody who can help you today, but if you establish a good working relationship, and it's the old adage, it's not who you know, but who knows you.
Yes.
And you show them what kind of person you are, then they go to bat for you.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because before leaving for DI school, you have different schools that you have to go through. And it was my time to go through the career school. And to your point, all of a sudden, I knew a guy in supply. I knew a guy who did this. I needed to get to the range and there were no quotas. How do I work that? I knew the PMI now. And so it was something that going to DI school, it's like I had these people that I could fall back on, and chat with and ask the questions to. And again, it just paid itself, in dividends, once that experience was over.
That was the first experience being in front of new recruit Marines as a DI.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's, you get nervous. I mean, because you want to go out there and,
it's not like you've got a role to fill, literally speaking.
It's, and so being a parent, I think that kind of came into play where I always thought of them, not in a motherly sense, but they're somebody's kids, and so I would never do anything to put anybody's kids in danger or anything. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So we all do the same thing, but there's always, at least when I was there, we did our thing and we're rule followers. So I definitely followed all the rules, but it was fun to, I would drive in and think, what kind of chaos, am I going to do? Who am I going to pick on, today? There was this one time when Bath and Body Works started becoming really popular, and some recruit got a package in the mail with country apple. And, drill instructors, you're not keeping that, don't, and you do the things. And I remember telling her, you go ahead and keep that, you go ahead and share it, So the whole squad base smelled like country apple. And I'm just waiting for after lunch, because it was like April-ish, into April, where I was going to take them out, to the pit. And the sand fleas, are just flocking to that sweet country. So, I mean, just that vindictiveness of women sometimes that came through there. But behind my silliness, there was always a method to my madness, and I would say, if you can't put, your canteen and follow directions, to put your canteen, flush on the lower left-hand side of your foot locker, how can I figuratively, not literally, give you the keys to a 7-ton and expect you to take troops from point A to point B. So it was really just instilling not just the camaraderie, but the seriousness, of what they were going to be doing post boot camp, as women, you got some barriers out there. Now, mind you, we're still in the mid 90s and things are still changing. Tailhook, it just happened in, 91? I saw a shift when that happened. And I was at El Toro at that time still. but I actually saw a shift over shenanigans that happened before and stuff that just didn't happen, anymore after that. But we're still kind of climbing out of that. How do you, present yourself? How do you rise above, the conversation, that's going to be happening using, some of my experiences, that I had and, things, you want to do, but you want to be like authentic to yourself, but not to fall into, some of the traps that are there. And it was interesting because while at DI school, so my class was the first class where females were given the campaign covers. So I had mentioned the cord. We were the first class that got the campaign covers. And I'm telling you, that was like controversy, and again, you're talking 1996. So it's not like it was a million years ago. I look at these young ladies today and it's like ancient history when you think about it, but it was a big deal, back then. I mean, all the way from looking manly to they don't deserve it and just interesting in the way that people, accepted it. I mean, I never wore the cord, so I don't know. But man, that campaign cover, it was one more step toward equality. I know that sounds, a little crazy, but one step more toward equality. And I'm telling you, man, female drill instructors rocked those campaign covers. Didn't matter what kind of hair you had, long, short, bun, braid, whatever. There's just something about it. You put that on, you bring it down low, and it's just like that sense of that goes along with it, that confidence.
Well, even in the late 90s, you got to figure there's still a percentage in the Marine Corps that are Vietnam era and still very much carrying that mentality. There wasn't I'd call it the woke mentality, whatever you want to call it. You're still dealing with largely a mentality of the Marine Corps is the man's corps.
It really was. And it's interesting, Paul, that you say that because, here we are, 2024, and there's certain things that like, I'll look back on certain experiences and it was like, oh, that was wrong. And I'm from the generation where you just rolled with it. Now, don't get me wrong. If something wrong, illegal, I was always the one to put my hand in the air and stop it. Didn't earn me a lot of popularity points. But again, good order and discipline, big deal, when you're in. But just, doing things that I didn't want to go do, because I wanted to be one of the boys or I wanted to be part of the crowd. And so it's that realization where I know things have gotten better today. I still got a ways to go, but I look back on those early years, somebody yelling at me, "Hey, you WM," you couldn't call me sergeant, you had to call me WM, and again, that's not a slang or a disrespectful, terminology, but even again, you're talking 93, because that's when that happened, that there's some young person out there, that's how they're identifying me. So, for me, it was always faster, harder, stronger. How do I rise above the noise? How do I give absolutely nobody, any indication that I am any different than any of my fellow Marines, that are out there. And it comes with a price. And again, I'm still trying to, figure out like whimsically, who am I, without the hard, rough, exterior. And I'm getting there.
Did you naturally have a quote unquote voice, or did you have to find that drill instructor voice?
I've always had a big mouth. So like the whole cadence thing and everything, that was never an issue for me. But I also found my voice, in being out and speaking, the things that need to be said. Again, I'm working in a battalion full of women, at this point. We had a young gentleman who, because everybody goes and does their quota somewhere. And I'm like, oh, wow, you pulled the short straw because you get to be the company gunny at 4th Battalion. And so it was the complete opposite for him. So, I'm in a male-dominated, environment where this guy now is in this female battalion where all of a sudden, don't be the one to leave the seat up. There's just this whole other set of rules, that comes along with it. But I found my voice on top of it.
I've always said that, the Marine Corps does a fantastic job of marketing the Marine Corps and selling and really getting that buy-in on truly the brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
The little jokes, like you never say a former Marine,
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that the Marine Corps, takes absolutely seriously. For me, when I hear cadence being sung,
Mm-hmm.
you're just kind of like, man, there's something down in your gut that just goes, I wish I had been in the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that you're taught, or you just kind of develop on your own, or some people just have a better natural flow for it?
Natural flow, for starters. You have to work at it. So this is where being a musician actually came into play.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Because it has to come from your gut. Anytime it comes from your throat, you're going to end up with that froggy, And I would make fun of, my guy friends. I'm like, clearly you're not, yelling from your gut, basically. But you have to figure out. And so interestingly enough, every single platoon I had, my cadence would get better and better and better as time went by, because you're crafting it, and it's your unique voice. So yeah, maybe so-and-so had the best cadence and we all wanted to sound like her, but we really didn't. We wanted to sound like us. I'm a woman. Okay. I didn't want to sound like Minnie Mouse. I would always tell my recruits, please put some bass, into it, where you're not, yes, ma'am, put some bass, get some lower notes there. But I wanted to sound like me, because I wasn't a guy,
Right.
And so it's like everybody crafts their own voice. Some do it better than others. There were those drill instructors, for the life of them, where like getting a tempo, it was just
Literally
like,
2 left feet.
yes. But for me, it came naturally. Those first platoons, especially like when you're the drill instructor out there doing initial drill, I remember my abs just hurting and that's how I knew I was doing it right, because you're literally, doing all this core, stuff out there, to make it all come out. Lots of tea, honey, lozenges. Sometimes I still get scratchy all these years later, but it's like where my voice naturally, comes to now. So.
Now, going to the opposite extreme, though, you're supposed to be serious but you have fun within the core of drill instructors with a specific recruit class. How did you just keep, because I remember times when I was in the academy and one DI would crack just that right comment to that right recruit, and you could catch out of the corner of your eyes the other DIs just biting their lip to keep from laughing or losing it. How did you ever have that experience where you're just like, oh man, I just got to walk away for a minute?
Oh yeah. We would all just walk to the house and just close the door, and we're like, can you believe recruit? I mean, you try not to laugh, and then some of them, they're trying so hard to like find themselves, and it just would come out so wrong, and the recruits are trying not to laugh. So then you're on the recruits. What are you laughing at? And you're kind of doing that like dog pile, thing. And then the recruits still try not to laugh because what the drill instructor did was just so crazy. But it's those little things where just the camaraderie together. And I had some really tight platoons, and I had some really we worked so closely together for all those months, and I never spoke to those people again. So a little bit of both, and again, personality, life, relationships, what's going on with other people. But there's definitely, I had some really good girlfriends that I made. That's when I first realized too, that I need girlfriends. I don't, hanging out with the guys is great, but I need like female friends, especially female friends that understand my directness, understand my sometimes crassness, in saying things. Because when you leave that environment, the challenge isn't so everybody knew you were a drill instructor. The challenge is for somebody to say, wow, you were a drill instructor? Because you don't want to take that. You want to take all the things that you learned from it, but you don't want to take that persona, back out to the fleet, because that doesn't, you know what I mean? It doesn't serve. There's a time and a place, but it doesn't serve when you have another mission, that you're on. We had some really good groups, that were there, some really great people. One of my company commanders is a lieutenant general now. So super uber proud of her. Several of my friends retired as sergeants major, in the Marine Corps. So super proud of them. And it's just great to see how we all kind of grew up from this messy, chaotic, place where, we all ended up in these, fantastic, places, opportunities that were out there. One of my friends, Laura, I didn't serve with her on the drill field, but she went back to 4th Battalion and she was their sergeant major. So I mean, it's like you go to DI school, and then you come back, and now you're running the place. So I mean, it's kind of cool to have them, in my back pocket still.
What's the op tempo when you're at the drill field? Is it are you on a class, off a class?
So I mean, especially when you're newer, there's just not a whole lot of you time. They call it lights to lights because you're literally there when the lights go on. You're literally there when the lights go off. So you'll have a platoon at that time. I don't know what the tempo is now, just because we have women down at MCRD San Diego now and at Parris Island. But for us, there was never really a break. So some of the men would have a couple of weeks before they picked up their next platoon. Where for us, we would drop a platoon. If we did have a week or two, you were on the rifle range. If you had leave, you were trying to take leave. They always call the dog and pony shows. So all the different, extra stuff that you would have to do. So even if I wasn't, with a platoon, I was definitely doing something unless I took leave. So. And
that was specifically because you were a female.
Right. Because we just
had limited number of you.
Right. And we had one battalion. And so the ops, the op tempo where the men had 3 different battalions, out there. So, this shipment will go to first, this shipment second, this shipment third, and however their cycles, would work.
And is there a set time that you'll be at the drill field or can you remain there? I don't want to say indefinitely, but is it kind of until you either promote out or want to go do something else?
So when I was there, I was the last of the 2-year tours. And then the next class that came in was the first of the 3-year tours. So recruiting duty is 3 years, and that's when they made DI duty 3 years. Now, during that time, they call it a quota, where you take your break, per se, and your break could be working over at weapons, training battalion. You could be over at the education place, actually teaching, big classes. I ended up at our S3, so the training piece of it. So then I had my piece as a drill instructor, but then I got to see like the whole map, of what was going on with my battalion and being able to like really give good recommendations to the people who had to make the decisions on the who, what, where, why, when. So great experience on that part, and not all that different from the rest of the Marine Corps when you talk about training and being in that S3 position there.
And where was that duty station?
It's still Parris Island. Yeah, so I was there for roughly almost 2.5 years. So you count your DI school, and everything in there. And then I left in the fall of 1998.
To where?
29 Palms.
Wow. Did you pick 29 Palms?
Kind of, sort of.
Did you know about 29 Palms?
I knew about 29 Palms. I was thinking, again, my mentality was nuclear family, because I had just spent all this time away from my kids.
So they were still here on the West Coast while you were at Parris Island?
No, they were at Parris Island with me as well. So I did, like I said, I did get to see, my kids are my kids are who they are because of because of the lifestyle that I chose. And I'm not saying that it was easy for them, but they definitely, like my oldest is fiercely independent. And I really attribute that to the whole Parris Island thing, just because, dad might have been doing A, B, and C, and she had to do it, on her own. Part of it's her personality as well, but fiercely independent. So when I left there and wanted to come out, I picked 29 Palms, a little bit different, obviously out in the desert, but like nuclear family, so I was going to get some good time, to spend with my kids and, learn myself again, get back to my financial management community, and go out and do great things. So.
And what was your duty assignment there?
I was the travel supervisor. So again, you're talking about military pay and travel. The dispersing office is where I ended up again. And then I worked for the comptroller out there. So everything money-wise was, 3 buildings in a row.
Was there ever a point that you started looking at your transition out and what you were doing, and in the sense of, I'm building a great foundation for what is marketable for when I leave? Or was it something where you came to your transition out and just kind of went, oh, now what? Because as odd as it sounds, you went in the Marine Corps, but you did duty assignments that are probably one of the most marketable skills that you can take. You know, granted, somebody could spend 15 years, 20 years in infantry related stuff. There's not a lot of marketability for, you know, mortars and machine guns when you leave the Marine Corps. But basically, office operations, business operations is what you were doing.
At that point, I hadn't even thought about it because I was still in. I want to say maybe around 11 years, 12 years at this point. And so my thing was, what's next? And, the reality of like, I'm at this cusp in my career. Do I want to remain on the enlisted side or do I want to go to the officer side? And I hadn't been going to school. So like, I think I was afraid of it more so, like enlisted commissioning and programs like that, just because I had already been away from my family, so much. How do I do something a little bit different, that's still going to get me to a different place? Where at that point, I kind of am thinking about my future. What is that going to look like? So I chose the warrant officer route. And, it was one of those things where I was watching some of my friends who wanted to be, first sergeants and sergeants major. And that was really always the roll of the dice. There was never any guarantee that that was the route you were going to get. And so I had to ask myself, if I was going to remain enlisted, did I want to be in my community, on the enlisted side, or as we like to put it, or did we want to run the community, kind of deal. And so I did choose the warrant officer route. Was super excited when that happened because that was just opening up a whole new door of responsibilities and everything else. But it also meant more time away from the family because then I did have to go through, more training on the officer side before I could come back and then continue on, with my service.
So not understanding the subtle nuance, what is the deciding factor as opposed to putting in an officer packet, as opposed to choosing to go warrant packet for your career and your family?
So I didn't have the formal education piece for the regular officer. And part of me, I think, was a little intimidated at that point because I really didn't have any higher education. And honestly, I was like afraid of it. And so it wasn't the easier route. It was what can I do to still make the impact in my community? And so don't get me wrong, the warrant officer, you have an application process, that goes along with all of that. And so I was really happy, when I got selected, because it was going to change, the trajectory of what I was going to be doing within the community, especially on the back half of my career.
So not underselling the warrant program at all in any way. It was merely you didn't have the college component for the officer program.
Yeah. And so for warrant officers at that time, and maybe it's changed, I don't know if it's changed. I know every service has their rules, and requirements to get into the program. I still met the requirements to get into the warrant officer program. And the thing that, like my husband and I joke about now, the thing that I brought with it was that outside of my community experience, because I had that drill instructor experience. So you're still bringing something else back to the community, and you're able to shape your financial, because then you are the SME, in your community. So you're that subject matter, expert, but you still know how the Marine Corps rolls.
Warrant officer school is how long?
It was 3 months. They call it the Warrant Officer Basic Course, so WOBC. That's up in Quantico. You're a company. So we had 250 warrant officers in a company. All the lieutenant companies, are there doing their thing. And then you have on the other side, the FBI Academy at Quantico doing their thing. So that was lots of fun.
Do you intermingle with the officer?
Not for training, but just in passing, and you see them, and then, you'll see them, whether you're club or, you see them somewhere off base. But there was never any like training together.
Is there a 6-year requirement now that you've made the jump to warrant, the same way as if you were a new officer coming in and the minimum enlistment or commitment is 6 years?
No, you become indefinite at that point. So then it's on you, when you choose to get out. Now, there's still, you have to get promoted before a certain time, X amount of years, but you would hit that 20.
Got it.
In no ifs, ands, or buts, you would hit that 20. And then after that 20, the thing about the warrant officer community, though, is you're competing with the other warrant officers in your community. So like if you were doing special operations and I was doing finance, we wouldn't be competing against each other, which in turn makes it very, very slow and small. So it's like a puzzle piece. And you literally have to wait for somebody to retire, somebody to get out. We would always joke and say, well, who's the oldest and closest to death, out there? But that's literally how you would get promoted. So you could be the best thing since sliced bread. But if there were people in front of you who weren't getting out, and unless they got passed over, it was a waiting game. So by law, 18 months, you're appointed. So by law, 18 months. And then when you pick up CWO 2, that's when you're officially commissioned at that point. But then even if you were selected to 3, you still have to serve for 3 years before you can put 3 on. And that's by law. So, I mean, there is a slower trajectory to it.
Just built into it.
Mm-hmm. But it's something where the community is really small. And so like you use women in the Marine Corps as an example. That's just a small percentage to begin with. And then you take women officers, and that's a small percentage. But then you get down to women warrant officers, and that's like few and far between.
You ever feel like your body just isn't keeping up the way it used to? We all know that life doesn't slow down, and sometimes the grind shows up in ways that we might not expect. Lower energy, focus that's a little off, maybe even motivation that isn't quite there. Human Performance TRT knows what it's like to want to get that edge back, and they're here to help you do it without the runaround. A veteran and first responder-owned company, they're not just your typical telehealth service that just hands out prescriptions. Human Performance takes a full view of your health. First, you hop on a video call with one of their expert providers who goes through your goals, your blood work, and any specific needs you've got. From there, they create a personalized plan that goes beyond just hormones. If you need support with mental health, they've got it. If you're looking to get serious about weight management, they can coach you through it. The best part, they keep it flexible. No locked-in subscriptions. As you progress, they're checking in, making adjustments, and keeping your health plan up to date. Because what works today might look different down the line. Everything they do is sent right to your door, hassle-free, so you can stay focused on the things that matter. And here's another benefit. If you're already on a hormone replacement program or have recent blood work, Human Performance makes it easy to transition. If your lab results are less than 6 months old, you could submit those directly. No need for new blood work. They'll review your current levels and build a customized plan based on where you're at now, so you don't have to start from scratch. It's just another way that Human Performance puts you first, meeting you where you're at on your health journey. Human Performance TRT is built around your success. This isn't a one-and-done approach. It's ongoing with real guidance because your health deserves more than just a quick fix. If you're ready to take the next step towards optimized health, check out Human Performance and see what a real personalized approach looks like. And for listeners of the Transition Drill podcast, use the promo code TDP for 10% off throughout the entire time you work with Human Performance. So head over to hptrt.com and remember to use the promo code TDP, that's Tom David Paul, for 10% off your program.
So going to your point about setting you up for the future, that truly set me up for the future because I could go over to the left and roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty with the operations of what's going on in my office, but then I can turn around, roll my sleeves down, and go brief the chief of staff and not be afraid, to say the things that needed to be said, operationally, with what we need or what we're going to do in whatever, capacity that was there.
And they talk about officer school as kind of the gentleman's course. So for warrant, is it kind of a low key or is it very high stress also?
So it's not OCS. It's TBS, the basic school. So every regular officer will go through officer candidate school, but every officer will go through TBS. And that's what the warrant officer basic course was.
Got it.
And so, the basic school.
Did you come back to 29 Palms?
I did. And it was interesting because you're talking now right on the cusp of everything happening on 9/11. So I came back I had a great rapport with my colonel, and it was one of those things that just never really happened because I was going back, and now I was going back in this different capacity. And so you had people saying, oh, she's not going to have the respect there because she was this before she left, and now she's coming back at that. And I don't know if it was just me and the way I carried myself, but I didn't have I had my own growing pains, but with my office, I didn't have issues with any of the senior enlisted that were there, the company, that I was dealing with before. Everybody was a professional. And it's interesting because one of my really good friends, right after I had gotten promoted, she came down, for an inspection. We're outside and she sees me, and she salutes me. And I mean, that's one of the women I looked up to, so I mean, it was just that consummate respect. And it gave me confidence, on my end that I did the right thing, that I'm in the right position to kind of drive, our community forward.
Was it a normal practice of the Marine Corps if you did go or promote to warrant that you would not go back to your same duty station?
Yes. And again, I think it was, my boss, and it was interesting how he had his little world, mapped out. I just made his life super easy because I knew all the things, I knew it from the enlisted side. I knew it from the Marine Corps side. It was just a well-oiled office. And again, I give myself credit for that, but I also give my team, credit because they were the ones that were actually out there doing all the work. I'm just giving the guidance at that time. And that team also, again, going back to being professionals, that team there really helped me become a better officer. Because if I did something crazy, I had my female master sergeant just yank me to the side, and I remember trying to take, my chevrons, my rank off my long sleeves, because you never wear your long sleeves. And I remember bringing it in and pressing it and showing her, I'm like, hey, what does this look like? She goes, did you take your rank off? I'm like, dang it, now I got to go buy new shirts. But somebody to always kind of put me in check, or, hey, ma'am, you can't do that anymore. But just being professional about it, not being rude or nasty or, oh, get her out of here, they really kind of shaped me. So when I did leave there, I went and there was no questions asked.
Are there the same fraternization rules and requirements for a warrant as a traditional officer?
Mm-hmm.
How was that for you to make that change of, you got to kind of take a step back with some of the friends that you had,
mm-hmm.
and not that you couldn't be friendly with them, but maybe not just hang out as much?
You realize who your friends are. So my friends were always my friends. And again, I felt really, really fortunate to have all my friends that I met on the drill field, who were my sounding boards. Nope, you can't do this. Ma'am, you need to do this, and really giving me advice where I didn't have to go to somebody in my office. And nothing against our brand new lieutenants, but they're brand new lieutenants. They're trying to figure it out too. And that all of a sudden became my peer group, that company grade officer. So then there's me, I'm in my 30s now, and my peer group are 22-year-old men, for the most part. So I found out who my friends were, but it was also interesting because I found out who my friends weren't, and those relationships that you had to kind of just let go of, at that point. And I think it's just natural evolution sometimes. It wasn't because I was better, but it goes back to me being a rule follower. I'm going to uphold, good order and discipline. And so I'm definitely going to walk the walk, when it comes to all of that.
Now, you said previously that you were never really kind of interested in furthering your education, maybe even a little bit intimidated by it. Once you're a warrant, is there a little bit of pressure of, maybe I should at least start dipping my toe in that pool?
I motivated myself. And so for the rest of my time that I was at 29 Palms, I dove into it. So all those gen ed, classes that were there, feeling like the old lady sitting in some, I forget what math class it was, with all these young people, just trying to chip away, bit by bit. That was going to get me one step closer, because by that time I had realized, before I get out of the military, I'm going to have my undergraduate degree. No ifs, ands, or buts. Don't quite know what that looks like, but that's kind of the end goal.
And even getting the warrant rank didn't push your plans beyond 20?
At that time, 20 years was what I was thinking. It didn't end up that way. But 20 years was what I was thinking. So I had, again, you're talking 2000, 2001, so right on the cusp of 9/11. And then for so many people, 9/11 changed, everything. And so school got put on hold because operationally, we were all front and center, with everything that was going on.
What did 9/11 do for you personally as far as your career plans?
So in my community, and again, you're talking about a time other than Desert Storm, and Desert Storm was so quickly.
A cup of coffee.
It was so quickly. It was so quickly. It happened so quickly. And even with that, I remember people, they were asking for volunteers. And I remember the staff saying, no, you just had a baby, and to the guys there too, like they were intentionally like picking folks to go forward with that. So for me, what did it do? It was the reality. Didn't know how, didn't know where, but the reality, hey, I'm going to go do that, like honest to God Marine Corps thing, that's out there. Don't know what it's going to look like. Don't know where it's going to be. Don't know how many times it's going to be, but I know at some point I'm going to go forward. And so it was kind of letting the family know, in my own subtle ways, that these were the things, that were going on. And so my kids, obviously they remember 9/11 very differently than I do, but they totally remember it. They totally remember how they were feeling that day, what they were wearing, dogs coming on the bus. My younger daughter was like, we didn't want them to eat our lunches, but we all remember, like that day. And, what happened afterwards, is the big piece. And it was just the reality of it. And, you put your hand in the air, I solemnly swear, and it doesn't mean, oh, well, this is going on or this happened. It's something that I personally, along with so many other people, took very, very seriously. You join the Marine Corps, and at the end of the day, this is what we're here for.
And so you're how many years in at this point?
So 2001, like 12, 13 at this point, and got to Pendleton. So now knew, even with Pendleton, my goodness, I'm with the MLG. It was always weird how we were situated as far as like reporting and units, but I knew it was just going to be a matter of time. And it was just a matter of time before it happened. And again, you think, okay, well, like, what are money people, doing out there? And as my boss, and the boss before him used to say, it was money as a weapon system. So you're talking very early on in Iraq. So there was no online banking, at this point, it was cold hard cash. And so cash is king, how do you make it happen? And it was just crazy, and I ended up, so when I deployed, we used to call ourselves the bank for the Marine Corps. So I was basically the bank for the Marine Corps when we were forward. And then just all the operations that come along with it. And ironically, 15% of what we did was like military pay related. So like payroll stuff, PX stuff and things like that. The majority of it was all contractual, and all the different things that were going on during that time period as far as nation building. So it was a unique time.
Did you get involved with negotiating contracts? And I'm not necessarily you personally, but your unit negotiating like all the civilian contracts for bringing in all the contractors that were coming in that were providing services for the Marine Corps?
So as far as us in the contracts, we weren't part of the establishment of it, but we were that last signature on that contract when that contract got paid. So we were just like the end, before that vendor actually got paid.
And how long were you deployed?
Just under 7 months.
And came back to 29 Palms?
Pendleton.
And did you finish out at Pendleton or?
I ended up, I stayed at Pendleton until 2008. And again, just with the operation tempo that was going on. So then in the meantime, the Marine Corps is trying to do things better, more efficiently. We're clearly, here to stay for a while. It was one of those where we were developing like a new accounting system where everything was very, very manual up until that point. So new accounting system, Army had it first. let's modify it and do it for the Marines, where it was really going to make it, there was no way, basically that you could, you had to put it in a certain way for it to come out a certain way. There was no flexibility whatsoever in there. Not that we had a problem with that. It was just, now you're talking like 2005, 2006, 2007, you're definitely at that time where we need to be cashless, going forward. So that accounting system was there. And then on the ships, they had Navy cash, and then eventually we had Marine cash. Marine cash was run through JP Morgan Chase. And so being able to be a part of the Marine cash program and going cashless aboard the ships, but then taking that same concept and being cashless in the combat zone as well. And so that was Eagle Cash. That was there. So it was interesting working. So now, you're working, obviously in the Marine Corps, you're doing all the Marine Corps things. You're supporting, either you're deployed or you're supporting everybody who's deployed. And there were times where I think I worked more in the rear than I did when I was forward, making sure everybody had, the things that they needed. But getting to work with JP Morgan Chase, like I had no idea until after I got out. Wow, I was the project manager for Camp Pendleton with the establishment of Eagle Cash. So there's those things where you think about it after the fact, getting to work with the Treasury, getting to work with the Federal Reserve banks, which again is just interesting, all in the same. So, being able to have that experience, I was actually having fun, if I could dare say fun, because I was actually learning, a lot more about the community, beyond the community, and again, supporting, the effort, because it was like those 6-month rotations, you had and then we started bouncing back with Camp Lejeune. So then Pendleton would have a reprieve and Lejeune, Lejeune would be forward, but going back and forth, and then having to make sure as a community, we're doing things, as similar, as possible. And then of course we still have to answer to Headquarters Marine Corps, and our entity there, and so it was always interesting, when you have your boots on the ground per se, and then you have the suit, up in DC, and it was just very, like I said, I learned a lot about money. When
you mentioned DC and Headquarters Marine, did you ever get the opportunity to be stationed there or do a tour there?
It would have been my last duty station. But I had already made the decision to retire. And it was interesting because I wasn't even paying attention, but I didn't expect my name to come out, on a promotion list, but it did. And so for about a week, I really, really thought about it. And then the realization hit me really hard that I would be there by myself. My kids weren't going to go. I was going to be getting married, but my husband would have had to stay here. His kids were here. I probably would have thought differently about him if he wanted to come with me. And just that realization where I was like, I had already got accepted to school. I did finish my degree, prior to getting out, but it was one of those where maybe in another lifetime.
Well, and that's one of the things when I had the opportunity to talk to anybody who asks me, should I go federal law enforcement? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that you always have to have in the back of your mind when you're working for the federal government. Once your family gets old enough, established enough, all of a sudden they become the most important decision factor, mm-hmm. not necessarily what you want to do with your career or what might be the fun assignment or a duty assignment to go do. And in a weird catch-22, that's just one of the things. It's like, do you make the decision to stay single and have no children and take every advantage mm-hmm. that the Marine Corps could have offered you? Or do you have a family and then come to a point where it's like, I can't uproot my kids. I can't make them, bounce to another school for even just a year. Mm-hmm. Or like you said, your husband had kids who he couldn't leave also. So there's a lot of factors that you have to be thinking about long term.
Yeah. And we joke because we both retired, at the same rank. We both had very, very similar, careers. We'll joke around and we'll say, who was in the Marine Corps the longest, like to the grandkids. And like the one was like, Mr. Gary. And I'm like, oh no, it was grandma, And so, I mean, we still all these years later, talk about that, but it was time, And I did 26 and a half years. And my younger daughter was going through college, and that really was my kickstart for me to like go to school and get it done. And so I was a student for
Let's go together.
5.5 years. And she had come home one time and I was like crazy over some lower level gen ed class. I'm making it like this thing. And she's like, well, at least I know where I get my craziness, from now. And then all of a sudden it became a competition just for me. Like, I'm getting my degree first, not you, me. And so it was me, my younger daughter, my older daughter, just literally all in a row.
Now, when you went back to college or went to college, was there a specific plan in mind of what degree you were going to get in relation to what you wanted to do afterwards?
Right. So business, a Bachelor of Science, business management with the emphasis in human resources. And so, again, kind of capitalizing on business operations, working with people. I knew HR had a different component to it, didn't quite understand it all, at that point, but I figured that was going to be, the direction that I wanted to go.
How did that transition for you in the sense of, did you start making inroads and applying before you even got out, or was it you got out and then started that process?
So I was going to school while I was on active duty.
Right. But as far as the next career, the next job.
So no, that's a great question. I rolled right out of my undergraduate degree. I rolled right into graduate school. I was a student for 5.5 years.
You were like, I put this off long enough.
And it's gonna happen. And
is the PhD coming?
Some other stuff, but not that. So my husband had went through the executive MBA program at Pepperdine, and I was like flabbergasted at all he was learning. Wasn't my husband at the time, but I was just like amazed. And he was like the first one out of our peer group that really took a leap into academia. Now, I applaud anybody who goes to school, gets some kind of higher education, totally get it. But he definitely took a step into academia and really experienced something different. And I really wanted that. And I didn't want it just because he had it, but I saw everything that it did for him and I felt how it could shape me. Now, mind you, a lot of these transition programs weren't even a thing, at the time. So you had like the ETAP or ETAS, whatever they call it, the executive transition. There was something called Business 101, at Pendleton. I went through TAPS, but I had all the answers, because I was so used to having all the answers all the time, having to be right. My scope was very, very narrow. And so, I made my decisions when I graduated. That was the best thing I've done for myself, personally, was getting that higher education, because it opened my eyes so much to what used to work for me and what was not going to work for me, in the future. So I rolled right into that degree, right out of the Marine Corps. So that was my transition.
And what was your first step off after graduating?
So after graduating, again, still thinking, I got all the answers, didn't really quite know how to network. Don't even talk about mentorship to me, because again, we had it in the Marine Corps, but it just didn't click that I needed somebody to help guide me. So all my graduate work I did was on target. And initially we had somebody that worked there. So I was able to like ask her the questions, even though I wasn't working there, to help shape my projects and everything. So I thought, I'm gonna go work for Target. I want to do this, this, and this, very big pipe dreams. And it was one of those things where they talk about, what are your core values? What is your unique ability? What are you good at? And I just wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. I was thinking, I'm going to go work at Target. As long as I have a schedule, I'm going to be good. Learned a whole heck of a lot. I love the people that I work with. I'm still in contact with so many of them today, but it was totally not me and what I could do. And so after leaving Target, it was that first time where I was like, what the heck am I going to do? I've never been like a stay-at-home, kind of gal, with stepkids. My kids are grown, by this time. What the heck am I going to do? And I ended up working, it was a contracted company, but working for the Department of Labor, doing the career transition on the base. And I think that was my first really, really big eye opener on how I should have done things like really, really, really differently. I met some great people through that program. I still, again, am in touch. One of them, Bob, is my mentor in so many different ways. But we were that group of folks that we would actually like prepare and do as much research as we possibly could with the latitude we had, and making sure whether they were just separating from service or they were retiring from service, that we had as much as possible, to give to them. And so even though my time at Target was just a little over a year, I still had something outside of the military to give back. And, again, it's one of those things where it's not depending on your personality and what you like to do and how you like to do it, it's not a bad gig. It really isn't. Gives you a sample of society, though. That is for sure. I know at the end, my wick was somebody forgot to shut the door, like when they, come in before the store opens. And so a guest came in the store and I was very nice. I'm like, ma'am, you need to leave. She goes, well, your door was open. I said, unfortunately, they didn't pull it shut behind them, but, due to legalities, and she wouldn't leave. And so finally, Paul, I was like, get out of my store. And she goes,
DI
excuse
came back
me?
out.
I said, get out of my store, and if you don't get out of my store, I'm going to call Vista PD, and they'll get you. I'm gonna, Kathryn, with a K and an RYN, but I mean, it was one of those where, my wick got short, and unlike the military where you could get away with that, you totally can't get away with that. Grad school taught me what I could do and what I can't do, as well. But
what did you, so I'm going back to a comment that you made earlier where when you were on the drill field, your goal was when you interacted with somebody that they were surprised, like, you're on the drill field? When you got out, could you turn off the Marine Corps?
It took a little while. The directness. And I was trying to finesse it. So my team, we had a guy who lived in Arkansas. And so we were remote doing things before it was even a cool thing to do. Our other teams, they would like meet in Malibu. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that's like a 5-hour drive on a Saturday, to get there. So I was really glad that we did that. And we would pick times where we would do like 6 o'clock on a Saturday morning because it was only 8 o'clock for the guy in Arkansas. And then we could still have our whole day. But we had one gal, she had her babies on her lap. And I was so like trying to be so nice. Like, can your husband take care of your screaming kids? Like my wick was just very, very short and it wasn't always met, with understanding. And some people got it and some people didn't. I definitely alienated myself.
Directness in the private sector don't necessarily go together.
Especially with the women. And at that point,
it's a lot more asking than telling.
Yes. And I was very, very direct, on a lot of, I used to laugh and say I felt like Forrest Gump trying to find a seat on the bus, and then I'd eat with the guys,
She's not nice.
Yeah. And so I tell people, of course I was challenged academically, but for the first time in my life, I was challenged socially. Because I was always that person that everybody could, get along with, even if you didn't like me, you could still get along with me. But that one, it was like, how do what do we talk about? So turning off the Marine Corps was a little bit of a challenge. I didn't think it was going to be. My husband, it's like flipping a light switch. He's on, he's off. He's on, he's off. For me, it was like, oh my gosh, how do I get this out of my, how do I talk to people? How do I dress? And women are just kind of weird like that. Like I had super dressy.
There's colors other than green?
I know, and sweats. Like I try to put a little bit of, color in my wardrobe. That's like a goal, now. But, it's, super dressy all the way down to sweats. So it was really a big learning experience for me in more ways than one. So
on the flip side of that, when you were out, did you find that you really missed the Marine Corps?
I missed the structure. Did not miss the politics, the baloney, the babysitting. I used to laugh at the very end. I felt like I was babysitting 40-year-old men, running around telling them, you need to be on time, you need to cut your hair, and just all those little basic, tiny things that really it's not life and death, but it's the example. And it always goes back to the way I always rolled. It was, you were going to set the example for everybody. So, but I miss the people, and it was like that camaraderie and, finding that group of people that you could just be around yourself with. It was kind of hard to do that. Now, mind you, my husband was a Marine, so we could always joke around. But even after I got out, like he would get invitations to things and I wouldn't. And I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm out and I'm still not getting invited. You know what I mean? To all this, to all this stuff. So it was a lonely place, for a couple of years for me, just really trying to like fit in and not like be overly, having conversation and like sharing too much, but then, oh my gosh, I didn't share enough. And it was just a weird place to be in, especially when you're a 40-year-old something woman at this point, where you feel like totally awkward. And then I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to be setting the example for all my kids. Now I don't want my kids to be awkward, with this stuff, or my stepkids, to be awkward with this stuff. So it was definitely a little bit of a challenge.
For somebody who's listening, who maybe they're out and they're anticipating struggling, turning off whichever piece they are, but basically taking the uniform off and becoming a civilian. Was there something that you found after those couple of years that really kind of worked for you?
It really was initially it was leaning into the veteran community. Again, one of the best things that I did, LinkedIn really facilitated a lot of conversations and then coffees. Paul, the first time I went to go meet a guy I didn't know, I'm like dropping pins, to my husband because I was like weirded out, by it. And that was Kevin Cortez, and I still have a great relationship with him all these years later. So really leaning into the veteran network. And I know, just talking to my other friends, listening to some of your other podcasts, it really was a place where you can lean into it and you feel comfortable with it. So take advantage, being able to take advantage of that. But at the same time, you have to be able to be comfortable and confident enough to step out into things that you don't know. And I can't emphasize that enough because I have some incredible veteran friends who are doing incredible things, but I've also realized that that's just a small slice of the population, that there's other people out there that are doing just as incredible things and have had life experiences that I didn't have. And so I never, somebody once told me, and they weren't talking to me directly, but you never make yourself subordinate to somebody else just because they've had different life experiences that you have. And I figured that out at grad school. When I would get intimidated by the manufacturing person, I would just picture them with a flak and Kevlar, dropping them into the middle of Camp Pendleton. Like I would have these own little fantasies, where they wouldn't know what to do either. So they're all hotty-toddy right now, but my industry's, just a little bit different. But to seek out relationships that aren't familiar with you, because if you do it and you do it right, it's going to take some practice and it's going to take some time. You will find your group of people that are going to add to everything that you've done in the military and give you that confidence and drive to want to go do whatever it is you want to do afterwards. And I think too many veterans stay in the veteran space because it's comfortable. And I just, I'm at this place right now where I am totally stepping out, not stepping away. Still love it, still give back to it, in different ways. But I'm really stepping out, into society, I guess is a good way to say it, where I'm trying to forge my own path, like so many before me, have already done, but creating these new relationships along the way that are going to help me grow, and not be like, I want to be the dumbest one in the room. That's the bottom line.
I want to stay focused on that, but I also want to talk a little bit. Did the Department of Labor job lead to the Syracuse job?
It did.
And how did that come about? Because what I'm always interested in is the story of how opportunities come about, and making sure that when you see the opportunity, evaluate, does it work for me and should I take it? As opposed to, one of the things I think that many in our communities do is we get into one spot and then we get comfortable and like, oh, well, I don't want to, like you mentioned, I don't want to go try something new. This is working. But it's always looking for that next challenge.
So we, and what I mean by we, myself and a group of other people, you had the curriculum that the Department of Labor, all the way down to the page. They had time hacks for you and everything. What I would do is collect as much information as possible. So when these folks had breaks, they could come up and take pictures on their phone. If there was more than one, I try to make copies. Where TAPS is like your foundational. And at that point, you know, it was created for a variety of different reasons, but the biggest one being veteran unemployment. But it definitely wasn't a one size fits all for everybody there. And so I was beginning to notice, because I didn't just facilitate at Camp Pendleton. I did it at Miramar. I did it at MCRD. I did it down at Point Loma. You know, so I was at other bases, you know, where I would see all these different flyers with all these programs. And it's so funny, because I've told the ladies at Vet CTAP, so the Veterans Career Transition Program, I was literally going to call them, because I'm thinking, you know, maybe I need this. You know, at this point, like, I didn't know about this stuff, you know, when I was getting out, but I'm collecting all these flyers. And so I'm pitching all these programs to these folks that are in these transition classes. And I didn't even know like what I was pitching, but I kept on coming across the Syracuse, the Onward to Opportunity program. And I'm like, man, I'd love to do that. And I don't remember, I think I connected with the gentleman who had the position before me. We were supposed to meet. We didn't meet. And then I remember seeing on LinkedIn, he posted his position. And I was like, oh. And it was just like digging in there, like, I'm going to do this. And so I'm trying to do all the networking things that you're supposed to do and try to find, you know, all the people, you know, that were involved in that program, because I was like, you know what, I could do this, you know, give me a shot. Now, mind you, in true networking format, I didn't do that because I didn't know like the leadership, and, you know, nowadays I would do it way differently, but I got the job. And that was my first time post-service that I really felt like I was where I needed to be. So I was getting the higher education piece. And what's really cool about it, so it's the Danello Institute for Veterans and Military Families now. So the IVMF, Onward Opportunity, is just one of the programs that falls underneath. So if you look at the campus of Syracuse University, you'll find the IVMF. It's a beautiful brand new building nestled between Maxwell and Newhouse. So it's almost like it's its own school, you know, aboard the university. But everything done through the IVMF is grant funded. It's a nonprofit organization. So being able to help, like taking that step further in career transition with folks, was just, you know, it was something that I knew that I was going to be good at, and I was going to be able to help people not feel like Forrest Gump, mm-hmm. you know, on the bus there. And I was there for a long time.
Was it remote, or did you have to relocate to Syracuse?
No, it was remote. So the Onward to Opportunity program basically centered around bigger military installations. So JBLM, you had us in San Diego. I think we had somebody out in Yuma for a while. Texas, Virginia, you know, the National Capital Region, Hawaii, we had an installation out there where we were all remote employees of the university. Prior to COVID, we would have an on-site and an off-site. So twice a year, we're getting to meet up with all our colleagues. COVID happened, you know, and changed the tempo where it became a once a year, you know, on-site.
Hopefully the on-site was May and September.
It was usually like an August, September, you know, type
not January.
Yeah. But now my gal down here and I, we were always like, yeah, we want to see some snow. And they're all like, you know, no. But
That's a different level of snow.
I know. And they got dumped on too this past week. But it was really because you got that higher education piece of it. But at the same time, you know, now you're really in the mix where you have a national organization that's making a difference, you know, across the board. And so initially when the IVMF started, it was 100% like entrepreneurship. Onward Opportunity came along with the career enhancement. So Syracuse had a footprint, you know, on all these major installations out here where I was really able to reach out and touch people, you know, with opportunities. Now, the caveat is, you know, do your research. You know, maybe this isn't right for you right now, but maybe 3 years from now, it's going to be right for you. Or maybe your spouse is looking, you know, for a way to upskill. Maybe this is right for her or him now, you know, and maybe right for you a couple years down the road, because the program wasn't just for post 9/11 veterans. There was a small percentage of pre 9/11. So folks like you and I that were doing career changes, where we were able to get them a certification and they could start that, that new career. But what I loved about the program is the participants had to do the work. I couldn't do it for them. I couldn't write their resume for them. In fact, there were certain things that I stopped doing because I felt like it was almost enablement, where you want to give people the tools to be able to do the things and go make the mistakes that they need to make. But you also want them to have a place to come back to where you can say, hey, have you thought about this? Or do me a favor. I understand you're going to need to do what's best for you and your family, but have you thought about this? And again, people are going to make their decisions. And, I never, once would second guess anybody's decision on it. But I love the program because if they truly wanted that certification, they were going to have to be the ones to go ahead and do it.
What took you away from Syracuse?
Ironically, so 9/11 happened, or not 9/11, excuse me, COVID happened. And on a dime, all of us had to snap our fingers. And how do we still keep providing this service, even though we don't meet in person anymore? Now, mind you, as a team, we were already remote. So we all snapped our fingers and we created remote, cohorts, basically, remote classes. And so that was like a great feeling to be able to provide for people during a really tumultuous time, for everybody, and give them that little bit of hope, and I would tell people, look, man, if this is what you want to do, that certification is just like that higher education, man. It goes on your resume. It doesn't go away. Yeah, you got to go do your PDUs, but it's yours. You've earned it. It's saying something about your skill set. It's not going to make you the director of operations at Google, right away. But, you definitely have a a path forward, when you upskill. I had been toying with applying to the Veteran Leadership Program at the Bush Institute, and I had applied in 2021 and didn't get accepted. And I thought I was kind of done with that, meaning, okay, I tried, didn't happen, next. And I was encouraged by a good friend out here and our COO at the IVMF to apply again. So I went back, I kind of redid my package, was a lot more honest. And I got into the Veteran Leadership Program. So this is now June of 22. And just wow. I mean, I can't say enough about just being there, being amongst not only veterans, military spouses, looking for people that have no military affiliation, that care about moving veterans' causes forward in one way, shape, or form. But being part of that program really gave me the confidence to kind of take that next step. I really wanted to stay with Syracuse. I loved it there. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to do something bigger. But it's hard when you're in San Diego. I had no intentions of moving back to moving to New York. And it's one of those things too where you can't wait for things to come to you. You have to go find, you have to go find the what's next. And honestly, I attribute that to the Bush Institute for really giving me that courage, because the job was a sweet gig. It didn't pay tons of money, but it paid more than a lot of these other nonprofits, that were out there. I could have been comfortable, with all of that. And it really gave me the opportunity to, the courage to go do something else, And so when I left, it was intentional. I had one of those 90%ers, but no offer letter. And I should have played the lottery that day because I didn't get that job. But that was okay. I was okay because I still knew what I wanted to do. And I still had a network, where I was reaching out to people, having cups of coffee, show me my blind spots, kind of deal. And I was introduced along the way to I don't know if you've ever heard of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, Gino Wickman's Traction. So I have a really good friend, Brian, who we had talked about this pre-COVID. And then COVID happened. And it was one of those where I think I have something for you. And I think you would be perfect at it. And it really aligned because when I left the Bush Institute and that other thing didn't happen, it's going back and looking in the mirror. Now I'm in transition again. What is that going to look like? For me, being a veteran, when you work in the veteran space, you're helping just a small part of population. And I began to look like beyond just the veteran space. And mind you, there's thousands of us who have gone before without any of these transition programs that have really made an impact, in society on both the public and private sectors. And that's really what I wanted to do, is take everything, that I've done. How do I impact my community? How do I make a difference in my community where I'm maybe not, directly involved, like helping veterans, but how can I be a veteran, helping my community? And, I landed in my last, my last job there, and learned so much again about this operating system. I went to, it's called the Integrator Mastery Course. So Gino Wickman Traction defines visionary as your CEO, integrator is your COO. And, together, when the two of you are in sync, you have traction. And what's nice about the operating system is for like veterans and people who are used to structure, there's structure there. So your meetings are run this way. You have 90-day rocks. You have to-dos. If you don't get your to-dos, there's accountability, that comes with all of this. And it's all about inching your business, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, just one click closer to whatever that visionary's, end goal is. And so being able to like take all my experience, and go into an organization, which was wonderful as far as the mission, that goes with it, and being able to help them, move forward was just like, but I got to go to the, it was the Integrator Masterclass. I'm part of the Integrator Mastery Forum. So now I'm dealing with a whole bunch of people who have no military affiliation. So it's like I'm on the flip side again, where before I was in a room with a bunch of veterans. Now I'm in a room, by myself, and it's forcing me to definitely not look at things differently, but realize, hey, you've already done that, but you've done it in this capacity. And really being able to offer, solutions, advice, guidance to my fellow integrators, who are out there on how to move the business, forward. So it's been interesting. And again, it's all about learning something new and moving forward.
It definitely sounds like you've taken every opportunity to challenge yourself. Mm-hmm. And the not just challenge yourself, but looking at the bigger picture of, okay, where is that next step not only going to challenge me personally, but what is it going to allow me to do growth-wise? Mm-hmm. And then what opportunities are going to come from that? Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the short-sighted views that we often find ourselves in. I say the veteran and first responder community. We don't look long-term for what you might be able to do today. You mentioned previously, it may not have a benefit to you right now that you can measure, but whether it's a certificate program, whether it's your advanced education, whether it's taking a job opportunity, putting yourself in those environments, you have no idea what doors they're going to open.
Exactly. And the thing is, when the doors open, they open at the most unopportune times. And you're like, wow, what the heck just happened? And it's interesting, without going down a rabbit hole, but our family's really been challenged this year. My husband had some pretty serious health things happen to him. I couldn't be at work the way I needed to be at work because I needed to be with him. And it really, I stepped away, from my position. And it really has opened my eyes to, I hate it when people have to go through something, before they realize it. So that's like the other thing, is you try to get people to realize as much as possible that life is too short. But it's really opened my eyes to the best, like, how do I want to spend, my next 10 years? So EOS has something called the VTO, or the Vision Traction Organizer. And it's not just a business thing. You can take it and apply it to your life. What's your 10-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 1-year plan? What are your core values? What are the things, if you want this, by December of 2025, how are you going to get there? And use that, for your own personal life. And, my husband and I start really looking at 10 years sounds kind of scary, for us, like really 10 years from now, what are we going to be doing? But it's really forcing ourselves to think about, how are we working, right now? Like, what do you want to do? We've done this. Grinding. I'll grind for anybody as long as it's intentional, but like unintentional grinding, I'm like done with it. And how do you spend these like last years going forward? And I think for both of us, more so for me right now, is how do I serve my community? How do I, help somebody? I don't want to be like a savior or anything, but how can I help you get to the next place that's going to be beneficial for you? Because at the end of the day, what lights me up when somebody gets a certification, when somebody gives a speech, and they're flawless, when somebody, gets the job, that they wanted, I literally, experience joy when folks do that. And it's like, how do I do that on the business front, whether it's for profit, nonprofit, how do I get in there and help you get there? And so it's somebody explained to me, instead of being a doer, like as a COO, being a doer, think about it as facilitating, because you have a staff to do it for you. You shouldn't be you doing it, especially on the small business front. And again, every organization's different, but how can I help you get there? How can I facilitate with visionaries out there who have 3,000 ideas, in one day? How do I, capture all those ideas, put them, my old boss used to call it Idea Island, and what's going to help us, with this quarter? What's going to help us with the annual goal? Because it all has to tie back to those goals you set for yourself. And so that's kind of, I want people to realize that you don't know what you don't know. And it could totally be behind like a door, 3 doors ahead, that you don't even know about. But it's having the confidence and letting yourself, experience those opportunities when those opportunities are there. Now, don't get me wrong. We live in Southern California. We have kids. We have mortgages. I get all of that. But it doesn't stop
you. It's very cheap to live here.
Oh, yeah, very. But it doesn't stop you from having like your dreams and your things that you can do, on the side. And I'm not telling people to go get their own business and start their own business, but what are those little things that you can do on the side that you never even know, are going to turn into something else, later on down the road?
But the flip side to that, though, is if that little voice in your head is saying my own business, have the confidence to at least give it a shot, give it a try. Exactly.
And so many people, I mean, entrepreneurship, it's all about small businesses. So I think it was in 21. The entrepreneurship program at the IVMF, like the big one is called the Veteran Edge. And I got to go help out with it. And so you're talking to all these, small business owners, veteran-owned businesses, everybody from cutting boards to hair products to coffee, defense contractors, starting up. The majority of people there wanted to be able to own a house or maybe 2, or maybe a boat, travel. There were a few there that really had big aspirations for their business, but the majority of them were just happy being their own boss. And then for the handful of employees they had, being able to provide a really good life, for those employees that they had there. But the number that got me, again, 21, 94% of us work for somebody else. And that's like, when you think about it, that's like 94% of us work for somebody else. And here in San Diego, it's probably an older statistic. I want to say 80% of our businesses here in San Diego are 500 people or less. So when you think about it, you're still going to have your Amazons, your Booz Allen Hamiltons, government work, whatever. And if that's your calling and that's your place to go, please, go do it. But your opportunity literally might be right down the street for you, at the guy who's starting his own plumbing company. It's a business, it's small business. And I know people, they hear all these things. I should be making this much money. I should be doing, X, Y, and Z. Again, you're going to have your own bottom line. That's yours and your family's, and you don't share that with anybody. But man, if there's one of those small business opportunities that's going to be at least, it's something to check out, because you learn the whole kit and caboodle when you're, regulatory. How does it impact the community? What is it doing for the community? How are you building, a community builder? What do you do, to give back to your community? And it's just been very fascinating, for me over these last, 15, 16 months or so.
Well, as you've already made, call it a transition, and not that you're giving up on the veteran community, you're looking for additional challenges across the board, not just veterans, to challenge you professionally.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take it back, starting that small business, if you are a veteran or first responder and you have that desire to help those communities, how better are you situated to ensure that you're going to be able to help if you're the boss making the decisions?
Exactly. And that's, no, definitely not giving up. I've just realized I can do so much more, without the constraints. And don't get me wrong, I miss, the IVMF. I'm still really good friends with Joanna, and I love talking to her still. Really proud of her for all the things that she's still doing with the program. But it's her program, now it's not my program anymore. It's her program now. And I just get to take away all the great things, that I've done with it. And I've sold myself short. And so, it's like communicating to people, if you feel it and you want to explore it, do it. Don't let somebody tell you, no, you can't do that. Or, what is it, James Clear, all those little habits that you have to change. I've realized, wow, I really am fixed, with certain things that I do in my life. So how do I start chipping away, and creating new habits, that are going to make me better? And I think that's what I want the veteran community and even the first responder community, that there is life after, serving, on active duty or in the force, that there is life after. And how can you take all the great things you've done, good, bad, and indifferent, and make community better and just be challenged by that. And that's what I love.
Something that you just said that really kind of hit in the gut. And I think for a lot of us, we've all been there, but we sell ourselves short. And we realize it, not when it's too late, but we definitely realize it when it's, man, I don't have as much time as I wish I would have had to challenge myself or take on those next opportunities.
Yeah. And, it's fear. And again, everybody, money is such a motivator. And again, out here, probably more so than a lot of places. But money is really a motivator. I also feel that we tie ourselves and we tie our identity to our work. And so when you talk about core values, obviously the Marine Corps, honor, courage, commitment. At some point, like my personal core values got like all wrapped up in that, where I'm like, well, what are my core values? And again, I'm not saying the other branches don't have to deal with this, but sometimes you're living it, where that's kind of who you become. But what are the things that are important to you? So like, what are your core values? The things, whether they're one word, or a sentence, for how you live your life. What are your boundaries? Like, I'm still practicing boundaries because I want to help everybody. I want to do everything. And when you do that, you give 10% here, 20% there, and, you just kind of get an average,
Wait a minute, I've spread myself 150%.
It's like, how do you do that? But bringing it back in, it's, the boundaries, being able to say no, being able to say, hey, that's important to you, but this is important to me. I mean, I would find myself having conversations where, if you need to get a hold of me, please text me or call me on the weekend because I won't be checking my email. There's nothing, if something catches fire, please, call me. But there's nothing on a day-to-day basis that we're going to need to do on the weekend. But if you do need something, please call me because I won't be doing this. So it's the little things. And then making myself not have my work email on my phone, where, okay, if you're going to hold true to that boundary, how do you not have it? So it's the middle of the night and you're checking your phone. And I mean, we all get wrapped up in all of that, but being able to differentiate who you are without a title, without a role, who are you? And I think once, at least for me, as I'm really beginning to discover this, the opportunities are there, the doors are opening. And now it's like, what door do I choose? And having the opportunity to go out and do some really great things, for great people and, help people along.
Do you have a set long-term goal yet? The next version of you?
Yeah. So today I'm taking December to really just put it all down. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago. It's called the Summit. And I belong to a group. It's called the Female Executive Mastermind. And it's for second in commands. We call them 2ICs, basically. And the founder started it when she realized she was the only integrator in the state of Alabama. So huge group of women, that come together. And I won a remarkable. So I've been using my remarkable and playing around with all of that. It's so much easier. And then I have it on my phone and it just works so much better than OneNote. But anyhow, I'm really trying to lay out loosely what my plan is going to look like. But what I want to do going into 2025 is I don't think I want to go back and work for somebody full-time as an integrator. Now, mind you, I don't want to sound indecisive when I say this, but if the right person and the right organization came around, of course, I would look at that. I'm even more confident that I don't want to go out and just get a regular job. I really want to pursue fractional work, not just with EOS companies, but with other companies who are using, another operating system to kind of inch their way forward. And the focus really on small business and nonprofit, because let's face it, what nonprofit can afford you? And so bring me in fractionally where, maybe I'm only there 1 or 2 days, but I don't half step with anything. So I'm going to work for you on those 2 days, but you're not going to be paying, what you can be paying somewhere else. But that's the place where I want to go. I'd love to have 1, maybe even 2 clients so I can capitalize on my last integrator role and then moving in with 1 or 2 clients. And then I'm really exploring with a friend that I met over the last year, helping her with her startup. And I've been taking all these assessments, and I'm talking like way outside Myers-Briggs and, the Strength Finder. It's called the Colby. And I realized that my self-start number is really high. And so just going through and exploring that, if something is like status quo, I get bored with it. I'm ready for the next thing. And it's interesting because I go back in my life because I never realized that about myself. I go back in my life and thinking about, well, where did you thrive? I thrived when I was in chaos. But then once the chaos was established, it was time for me to leave and go on. So that's really appealing. I did another one called The Working Genius, I love it. Because not only do you see like where you fall in the continuum from wonder, which is basically just the dreamer, the creator of ideas, all the way down to tenacity, which is the doer. Like I'm sitting there checking boxes off. But you can take that and you can take it with your team and you can see on your team who falls where. So if you don't have anybody in wonder, what do you need to do to fix that? Or if you have too many people in wonder, how do you fix that? Do you have the right people, in the right seats? So just doing things that are digging in just a little bit more have really kind of opened up those doors to what I mentioned earlier about like, who am I? When I shake away the rough, sometimes masculine exterior, who am I? That goes with it. And so that's really where 2025 is taking me. I pray for my husband, that if it is time for him to do different things, that he makes right, solid, good decisions, but support him with whatever he wants to do because that's his journey. And then at the same time, my daughters are old. Okay. My stepkids are old too. Now they're getting older, but I want all of them to know that just because you do a career doesn't mean that has to be the only thing you do in life. So really just trying to let those closest to me know that it's okay. And maybe you're doing clinical occupational therapy right now, but maybe one day you'll have your own ergonomics business and you'll come in and facilitate, to folks out there. So just really, letting those closest to me know that it's okay, to pivot. You make sure all the other things are solid. And it's scary and uncomfortable, but that's when you're going to learn.
I would say so many of us get wrapped up in chasing a pension and we miss out on opportunities if we just step off that set of tracks and try another one.
Yeah. And it's, again, life is life. We look at some of our friends that are in the National Capital Region and they've done just some incredible things, but it's different here in San Diego, so, there's different things that are keeping you here. It just kind of is what it is. You can't complain about choice. and like in our family, other than my daughter and my stepson, nobody's in the military. So choice is being here. Choice is having the job that you have. And if you want to do something different, go do something different.
Anything that we haven't covered or any last pieces of advice?
We talked for a long time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank
you.
Did.
I really did. And thanks for letting me share my story. Everybody has a story, and I look for the stories that aren't necessarily like front and center. And sometimes those are the ones that are the most impactful. But just don't be afraid. If it's there and it's burning, do your research, take the plunge. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, but I don't think when you think out a decision, history's full of really good ones and really bad ones. But when you methodically think out why you should make this decision, even if it doesn't turn out, you've done your work. It's not like you just pulled it out of your pocket, and said, I'm going to go do this. It's what you learn from it. And it's all about learning.
I appreciate your time. I wish you all the best going forward.
Thanks so much, Paul.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.